and welcome to yet another episode of On The Grid Podcast, episode 35 of season 3. Wow. I'm telling you guys, we could be closing in on episode 50 by the end of the season. If we're adding in all the extra episodes that might come on top of this after the season ends. But yes, episode 35 of series 3 today. As per usual, I'm joined by my co-host Ethan Evans. This time, Ethan is in the co-host seat. How are you in that sort of side of the camp?
I don't mind it, I don't have to do as much prep work, so I don't mind it too much.
Yeah, of course. The added prep work comes in as the host, and that's what we're sort of doing on a weekly basis. So we rotate it, and we take turns hosting because that's what we do. We like to take turns, but it seems to me, come to my occurrence, that most of the time you're taking reviews nowadays, and I'm just taking previews.
Well, it does seem that way at the minute, but I think, we've got a triple header coming up, so we'll both get our fair share.
Yeah, a triple header coming up, a lot to speak about regarding news. Also in the episode, we'll round out our Qatar predictions, we'll recap them, have a look how we get on. Probably dismal as usual. We'll look into some news, as I've already mentioned, and then we'll look into our Qatar/Austin predictions. And once again, it's another sprint weekend. Would you like to see that? I don't. I hate sprint weekends personally. But let's recap our Qatar predictions. So I've kind of rounded it up as the sprint shootout and the sprint and the quali and the race together. But let's recap our 2-star predictions to begin with. Ethan, how did you get on in the star predictions?
It wasn't too bad. Not too bad. I got a bit jammy with one of them. So the first one was Hamilton top 3 in quali, which he jammied his way to after both McLarens had their lap times deleted. So happily take a point there. And the other one should have come through. I had double Alpine points, and I don't know what happened with Gasly at the end of that race, but he was running in a decent position. He was running, I think, up in like 8th or something, and he slipped back so far. I think he finished 12th in the end. So not to be on that one. A little bit annoyed with that.
Well, at least your fortunes were better than mine. I went with a very, very much fastest lap theme. Charles Leclerc to top Q1. We know he was nowhere near. So that was in the window. And the second one was Carlos Sainz fastest lap in the race. And we know he didn't start the race. So nil point from 2 for me. But looking into the sprint shootout and the sprint, I'll go with my predictions to begin with. So I went Charles Leclerc to get sprint shootout pole, which he didn't. Max Verstappen to get second, Carlos Sainz third, George Russell fourth, and Sergio Perez fifth. I'm pleasantly surprised that I got George Russell bang on. I usually get the pole sitter bang on. But to get 4th place for George Russell, I'll take that. I'm not Mystic Mike, but I'll take a 1 out of 5. And then in the sprint, I went with a Max Verstappen sprint win, which he didn't. He came second. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz to round out the podium in second and third. Sergio Perez to get 4th, and then Lewis Hamilton to get 5th, which he did. He got 5th in the sprint. So I got the 2 Mercedes right. I'm not a Mercedes fan. I'm not Mystic Mike, and I didn't get the pole sitter correct. I'm the race and the sprint winner. 2 out of 10 overall in the sprint aspect for myself. Ethan, how did you get on in the sprint formats?
Absolutely terrible. I got a big fat 0 out of 10. So in sprint quali, I had Verstappen, Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, Hamilton. Very close with a couple of them. I just had, I backed Piastri. I just didn't think he would put it on pole. And in sprint race, I went for Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, Leclerc, Perez. So I had the right podium, just in the wrong order. So that's a little. I'm a little bit annoyed with that, but it is what it is.
And then in the quali in the race, I go back to my forte. I got the pole sitter and the eventual race winner correct in Max Verstappen. He got me 2 extra points for the weekend. For the quali, I predicted Charles Leclerc to get second, Lando Norris in third, Carlos Sainz in fourth, and Lewis Hamilton in fifth. I mean, I got a couple of them there involved, but it just wasn't meant to be. And in the race, I, of course, went Max Verstappen to get the win, with Lando Norris in second, Carlos Sainz in third, Charles Leclerc in fourth, and Fernando Alonso in fifth. So I mean, even if I went a position higher, a position lower, maybe for Charles Leclerc and dropped out Fernando Alonso and put George Russell in fourth, I could have had an extra 2 points, but it wasn't meant to be. I'll take 4 out of 20. I usually get about 1 or 2, so I'm happy for that. But Ethan, is it a 2 or is it a nil point?
It's better than a 2. It's better than 2. So obviously, I got your standard. I got Verstappen, pole, and win. So for quality, the rest of the top 5, I had Norris, Hamilton in third, as I said, for my star prediction, which I was happy about. And then Sainz and Piastri, fourth and fifth, who are nowhere near. And then for the race, I had Verstappen first, as I said, then Norris, Sainz, Hamilton, Piastri. So Norris, I was just one place out on, but I had a bit of a stinker with Sainz and Hamilton because they didn't even finish the race. Well, Sainz didn't even start the race. So 3 out of 20 for me. Not as good, but we let's see if this week is going to be any better.
Yeah, we say that every single episode. Oh, let's hope this week will be better. Let's hope next week will be better. It never ends up getting any better, and it ends up getting worse. So let's not get our hopes up. I reigned this week, getting 4 out of 20. So I mean, I'll take it. I'll take a victory crown on my head. But moving on to the news before we do our coach predictions. A little bit of news to reflect on. Obviously, Max Verstappen won his third world title. It was last weekend. But I mean, it's a third straight championship for Max Verstappen. Ethan, the real question is, we know how determined Max Verstappen is to get victories upon victories upon victories. Do you think this world championship ceiling kind of win in Qatar, do we think it will alter his views for the final 3 races? Do you think that Red Bull are likely to try something out ahead of 2024, or do you think it'll be the same Max Verstappen gunning for victory once again?
Well, you know what Verstappen's answer to that is going to be. He wants to get as many wins, as many records as he can. I think he's closing out on the all-time points record, which I think he actually set himself last year. He broke Vettel's 2011 or 2013 record, I think, last year. And he wants a wins record as well, which he's closing in on again, which is his own. So, from Verstappen's point of view, I don't think he's letting off. He wants another five race wins to round off the season to mark an absolutely dominant season. But in terms of Red Bull, yeah, maybe they look towards next year. I think most teams are at this point. I think a couple of teams are bringing upgrades to Qatar, but from Red Bull's perspective, I think it's very much focused on 2024, and it has been since probably the summer break, when they just look unbeatable. So yeah, it depends which way you look at it. Maybe Red Bull will turn down the engines slightly over these final few races now that both championships are sealed.
Sticking with Red Bull, we obviously know Sergio Perez is under immense pressure heading into the new season. I saw a rumour on one Formula One website. It has stated that Helmut Marko has gone on record to Sergio Perez and said that if he does not secure P2 in the championship, Daniel Ricciardo could replace him for 2024. It's very spicy, and it throws another spanner in the works, because I think that Sergio Perez could be nearing the end of his Formula One career. I don't think that it's salvageable now that obviously Red Bull have tried to deploy him as a second driver. It just hasn't worked out. He's not been able to challenge Max Verstappen as they thought he would. And he's just being outclassed by the Dutchman. But the seriously scary thing is, if Perez does not secure P2, does Daniel Ricciardo get the seat like that? Is it as easy as that? Because obviously Perez is contracted until the end of next season. So do you think that it's going to be as easy as an overnight fix and Daniel Ricciardo goes straight into Red Bull seat? Or do you think that Perez, well, of course, Perez won't go down without a fight, but do you think the situation is salvageable for the Mexican?
Well, I've got to feel a little bit for Sergio Perez. Yes, he hasn't had the season that people probably expect, but he is still second in the constructors. And let's not forget, this is the job Red Bull want him to do. They've got a dominant car at the minute. They don't want him up challenging Verstappen for wins and for the championship. They don't want that. They want Verstappen to be their number one driver. Perez was brought in as a number two. There's clearly defined roles. And this works for the time being. When it gets to the fact where you maybe have another team that are there challenging Red Bull, which, it's only a matter of time until there is a team that is in a championship battle and develops a car that can rival or beat the Red Bull. That remains to be seen. But currently, I think it'll be a very rash decision given the fact that Perez has about 10 wins in Formula One, countless podiums, and he's been in the sport for 12 years now. He deserves a little bit more respect than what he's been getting from some of the people at Red Bull. His performances haven't been good enough, but that car is clearly designed to work to Verstappen's strength, and rightly so. He's the number one driver. He's now a triple world champion, but I think we just need to calm down a little bit when we're thinking about firing Sergio Perez for Daniel Ricciardo, who in his day a fantastic driver. He's up there with the best drivers never to win a world championship, but he is not in a place to take that Red Bull seat, because of what happened at McLaren, and he's had 2 races back at AlphaTauri. I think we just need to hold fire a little bit for a few races, see how the end of the season goes, and then make a decision.
Just to put into perspective, with 5 races to go, Sergio Perez is only 30 points ahead of Lewis Hamilton and only 41 points ahead of Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin. Of course, Fernando Alonso, maybe it's a long stretch for him, but Lewis Hamilton can certainly catch him on his day. And with 5 races to go, with COTA, with Mexico, Brazil, a new track in Las Vegas, and Abu Dhabi, do you think that it's in the best interest for Daniel Ricciardo to maximize his performances, to show Red Bull what he's still got in the tank? Because, of course, he's been injured for a couple of races now. But he's coming back at Texas, which is one of his favorite tracks. So would a points finish in maybe 2 or 3 out of them 5 races be needed for Daniel Ricciardo to warrant himself a place back at Red Bull? Because Sergio Perez maybe does deserve that respect that he's not been getting at Red Bull during the latter stages of the season.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Ricciardo will be licking his lips at this opportunity. He'll be thinking, I have a chance after, a tough couple of years at McLaren. I have a chance now to go from not being on the grid to in an AlphaTauri for 2 races to now being linked with the Red Bull seat. He must be loving it. And, I think it could work, but that's a big could. I would love to see it work, but, I think... see how he is on his return. He loves Austin. He's going to love Vegas as well. Let's just see how these next 5 races go for Ricciardo, and then I think the decision should be made at the end of the season. Compare the 2 performances, but it is a feasible option because Ricciardo is still a good driver. That doesn't change overnight.
Another sort of rumor on the driver market. We well know that Lance Stroll is wanting to retire from the sport and is wanting to get out of the sport. One man linked with the job at Aston Martin is Yuki Tsunoda. Incidentally, there's been some reports that Yuki Tsunoda and Aston Martin have had talks, and it's upon Aston Martin to have talks with Red Bull regarding Yuki Tsunoda to see if they can sign him for 2024 or even 2025. Do you see it working out for Yuki Tsunoda, Aston Martin? Of course, it's going to be a little bit more of a quicker car. Maybe Yuki can utilize his talent and his speed and his just track knowledge in that car. But do you think that Yuki Tsunoda could be the man to help Fernando Alonso propel Aston Martin up the grid in 2024 or even 2025, whenever the move happens?
It'd be very interesting to see that. I didn't realise that Aston Martin actually had talks with Red Bull about Tsunoda, but I was a bit confused when I first heard the rumour. But now, the more detail you go into it, the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Yuki Tsunoda there was some question marks on the grid as to whether he would have a seat for next season. With Lawson coming back, obviously Ricciardo's been nailed in as soon as he took over from Nick de Vries at the halfway point. But with Lawson's performances when he stepped up, there was question marks as to whether Tsunoda would be kept on or whether he'd have a reserve driver role at Red Bull. So the more you think about that, if they're not going to show him that sort of loyalty, then why does he show the same thing? And obviously, he came into the sport because of the links with Honda, between Honda and Red Bull. They wanted a Japanese driver on the grid. Honda are being phased out even within now that it's been taken over as Red Bull powertrains. And I think some of the staff are being edged out that were working for Honda. So I think that's a storyline to watch up to the end of the season, because I'll be very interested to see how that develops. And also, it would get Liam Lawson a seat, which you got to say he deserves after the 5 races he's had.
Talking about Liam Lawson, you're doing these perfectly for me. I don't even need to just move swiftly on or anything. Phasing on to Liam Lawson, Williams boss James Vowles has gone on record to support Logan Sargent regarding his seat in Formula One, but has also gone on record and said that he's been very impressed with Liam Lawson as a stand-in for Daniel Ricciardo. So now here's another situation. Is Liam Lawson going to get the final seat in 2024 at Williams? Your take?
I don't see it happening. I don't think Red Bull would allow it, even though it probably makes sense to maybe loan him out to Williams for a year. But from Williams' perspective, they're trying to build up. They've got Alex Albon, who is a fantastic driver. They need a second driver who is capable of being a bit closer than Sargent has in terms of performance. They're looking at Felipe Drugovich. I think he had a test or something. There's talk about Liam Lawson, but if it is Liam Lawson, it's probably only going to be for a year, which goes against what Williams are trying to build. So I don't see it happening that way. And I do think the way James Vowles has come out and spoken about Logan Sargent, that he's probably all right.
He's probably just about okay to keep his seat for 2024, but we'll have to wait and see on that storyline. Moving away from the driver market and drivers switching places, finally, I think the driver market is slowly coming to a close for the 2024 season. Have you had a look at the new Haas livery for Austin? That is my question. Because I think the picture that Haas even posted, it looks like it's from the F1 game.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it?
So what are your takes on the livery? I mean, it's just a livery. This is a little bit different. It's got the American stars. It's obviously got the Chipotle sponsor. They've got all the sponsoring on the side. But it's one of the. I think it's not a fantastic livery, but it's an okay one. To obviously show their true colours, and to show where the team began.
It's a nice little touch. Yeah, it's not. I don't think too many people are going to be too ecstatic about it and call it one of the best liveries ever, because it's an okay livery. It's not bad. It's not great. It's pretty standard. But yeah, a nice little touch for their home race.
Onto our penultimate topic in news. let's talk a little bit about the America's triple header. So, of course, we've got Qatar now, then Mexico, then Brazil, all back to back to back. Um, do you think that this regionalized approach is the way forward? I think obviously Formula One are all about cutting carbon emissions and all and XYZ. But in past years, we've seen them going from one end of from one end of the world to the other end, back to the other end again, and it's just like, well, you're looking to cut carbon emissions, but you're just using more fuel and whatnot. But do you think that making races kind of regionalized, so like for example, using North America and South America, for example, in this case for this triple header, do you think that that's the way forward and they should kind of group these races in terms of the locality and how close each race is to each other, for example?
Yeah, definitely. Like I remember at the start of the season, we went from Australia to Azerbaijan to Miami to Monaco. Like you're bouncing around all over the shop there. It just needs to be a bit more consistent and a bit, I know a lot of the European races split up into the middle of the season. But does it really make sense having, Australia and then Azerbaijan and then Miami? You're going basically the entire way around the world. So yeah, it doesn't make too much sense. I think there's been some suggestions about cutting that down, but FIA are being a bit hypocritical. They want to do all of these schemes where they cut down the amount of tires or use a different type of fuel, but the actual main environmental factor is actually the travel from one country to another. That's the bulk of the emissions that are produced from F1.
Yeah. So I think the general consensus is, and going forward, I think the FIA are trying to do that, which is the perfect way to cut carbon emissions, and kind of go eco-friendly by 2030, which I mean is what they need to do, and a little bit less hypocrisy from the FIA is needed regarding that approach. But my final point in the news, it's a bit of a comedy aspect. Why not? I like a bit of comedy, and I like add a little bit of spice, a little bit of flavor, which is what I'm going to talk about. Formula One released kind of a questions themed YouTube video not long ago. And I don't know whether you're going to know about this, but they released it on their Twitter, and they asked Carlos Sainz about a pancake recipe. And he went into detail talking about how he makes his pancakes with honey, with the egg whites and the yolk, and with vanilla extract, etc., etc. Carlos Sainz, when asked, Carlos Sainz said that he has no toppings on his pancakes and he just likes the dough aspect. Yes, very strange. I found it very strange as well. But even just to round off the news, what's your favorite pancake topping? If you had to pick one or two, you could even go three. You can. What are your favorite pancake toppings if you had to choose them?
I didn't think that's where this one was going. Or I do like Nutella and banana. It's a good combination. It's a classic. Yeah, got to go with that one.
A good classic combination. But what have you made from Carlos Sainz not having any toppings on his pancakes? What do you make of that?
Well, I know that F1 drivers need to watch what they eat and everything, but that's a bit psychotic. I think we need to make sure he's all right, make sure he's all there. Yeah, that's probably the weirdest thing I've heard today.
Yeah, maybe when we go to Silverstone next year, maybe we can bring him some pancakes with some like Nutella and banana, or a little bit of maple syrup to add a little bit of spice in there. But that rounds out the news. A little bit of comedy aspects there. I had to add a little bit of a fun aspect into the news to make this kind of episode a bit more lively, a bit more because it's the end of the season and we're feeling a little bit down in the dumps. It's almost over, and we're gonna have to wait another couple of months until we can watch some action once again. But heading into our Austin predictions. It is a sprint weekend, of course, so we have a sprint shootout, a sprint quali and race predictions to go through. But let's begin with our 2-star predictions. Ethan, what are your 2-star predictions?
So, first of all, my first star prediction is Daniel Ricciardo on his return will score a point. I think he'll get some points in the bag. You know, the AlphaTauri is looking a little bit better over recent races. You know, saw what Liam Lawson's done. I fancy it. You know, it'll be a poetic little return. Back in the States, you know, that he's talked about so many times, and score a point on his return. My other one is not so poetic. It's a Haas double Q1 exit. You know, I know both of them are reasonably good qualifiers, but I think that this little homecoming is going to go badly. You know, the Haas is maybe one of the worst cars on the grid, definitely one of the 2 worst cars on the grid. So yeah, it's looking rough for them.
In my 2-star predictions, I've gone quite bold for the first one. Logan Sargent, one of only a few drivers not to score any points this season. I've actually got him to score his first points in Qatar. I mean, I know that he obviously had that retirement in Qatar. It wasn't obviously his fault. He just wasn't feeling very well, and had to retire the car. And obviously, driver welfare is the first priority when it comes to these races. But I generally think that he's going to be very hungry to score his first points in his second home race, as he is American. I mean, Miami is probably his closest race, I think, to where he lives or where he came from. But second US race, and I think he'll score his first points in Formula One. And for my second one, I've gone Perez outside the top 10 in the race. I generally do feel that the man will have some sort of retirement this time around, and it's not going to be all sunshine and lollipops, and it's going to be quite dismal once again. And he's going to be caught by Lewis Hamilton even more in the championship to put even more pressure onto his shoulders. But looking at sprint shootout and the sprint, I'll begin with my sprint shootout, and then I'll go into my sprint also. So for the sprint shootout, I've gone with a Max Verstappen pole, Charles Leclerc in second, with Carlos Sainz in third. I've gone with a Ferrari 2 and 3. I don't know why. Every single time I have a gut instinct, and every single time I'm optimistic, it looks to go downhill. So I'm gonna do it 3 races in a row to hope it's third time lucky. I've gone with Lewis Hamilton in fourth and Lando Norris in fifth. But for the sprint, I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm gonna go crazy. Charles Leclerc win. I don't know why I'm doing it. I'm just going absolutely berserk. Oh yeah, I don't know why I'm doing it. Max Verstappen second, Lando Norris to gain places to finish third, George Russell to go from 12th on the grid to finish fourth, and then Carlos Sainz to drop out the top 3 to finish fifth.
Wow, there's some interesting predictions. I've gone a little bit more run of the mill. I've gone Verstappen pole, of course, Piastri second, Norris third, Leclerc fourth, and Russell fifth. Piastri's a bit of a sprint race specialist at the minute. He had a bit of an advantage over Norris in Qatar, and I can see the same continuing this weekend. I think he also had a second place in Belgium, I think, as well, in one of the other sprint races. So be interesting to see that. And then in the sprint race itself, I've gone for Verstappen and Piastri 1 and 2 again. Russell third, Norris fourth, Hamilton fifth. I think Russell will have a good sprint race. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So
it looks like a good sprint race, but an awful race by the looks of things from Ethan Evans. But moving on to quality in the race, I've gone run of the mill. I've gone Max Verstappen pole. I've got Lando Norris second, Charles Leclerc third, Oscar Piastri fourth, and Carlos Sainz in fifth, with the race winner eventually being Max Verstappen once again, Lando Norris in second, Oscar Piastri in third, Charles Leclerc dropping down to fourth, and Lewis Hamilton finishing fifth.
I've also gone Verstappen pole, Norris second. I've gone Russell third, Hamilton fourth. an all Mercedes second row, and I'm going to get flashbacks if that happens. So I hope that actually doesn't come through. And Charles Leclerc fifth. And then for the race, I've gone Verstappen, Norris 1 and 2. I've gone Sergio Perez in third. I think in qualifying, I don't think he's anywhere near it, but I think that car is still good enough to just make up positions quite easily. I've gone for Hamilton fourth. I'd love to see him beat Perez and cut that deficit down, but I'm not sure if I see it happening. And then Oscar Piastri in fifth.
Well. That's some certainly audacious and some I don't know whether they're clever or just basic predictions. Mine are definitely not. Yours maybe a little bit more so, but mine are a little bit out there. But that rounds out episode 35 of Series 3, the Qatar Preview Edition. Thank you, Ethan, for joining me. We'll be back next weekend reviewing the race in Qatar. We'll be reviewing our predictions, and we will also be previewing the next race next week, which is in Mexico. Thank you for listening. Thank you for engaging. Thank you for liking our content. Like I said, we'll be back next weekend. Goodbye.